Well, you may have heard of it. So I, amongst a number of things, have created a book called Nuku, which profiles 100 Kakasa Indigenous wahine, and so it's pretty amazing to be sitting here next to two Kakasa Indigenous wahine today to talk about Indigenous research. We have the incredible Ngahuia Murphy, tēnā koe. And we and we have the absolutely wonderful Dr. Hinemua Aura, tēnā koe.
Kia ora.
Hinemua and I were both speaking at an event last night in Tāmaki that finished at around about 11 p.m. She then drove here today. Ngahuia, you've driven here today? Drove across today, so, you know, just give all your beautiful whakaaro to the stage up here. We might need a little bit of an energy boost as we get through. Ngahuia Murphy, Dr. Ngahuia Murphy, aroha mai, is a mana wahine researcher and author of the books Te Awa Atua, Menstruation in the Pre-Colonial Mauri World, and Waiwhero, A Celebration of Womanhood. Both books, if you don't have them, you must go and buy after this. In 2011, she gained her Master of Arts with a groundbreaking study of Māori pre-colonial ceremonies and practices regarding menstruation, and her PhD, completed in 2019, examined tohunga ruanuku and warfare and the resurgence of Indigenous women's ritual practices in Aotearoa, Turtle Island, and Hawaii. Yeah. Paki paki, ho mai te paki paki ki aia. Dr. Hinemua Aura has lived on Waiheke Island for 21 years. She is a child and adolescent psychiatrist working in the Child and Family Unit at Starship Hospital in Tāmaki, Makaurau. She is also a Māori strategic leader for the Centre of Research Excellence for the Aging Brain, and she is also the kaituhi of the Puka Puka Aroha, which you also must buy before you leave here today. So tēnā, ke o mai te paki paki. So we had a bit of a kōrero before we got up on the stage over the last couple of days about what we were going to talk about, and we thought we'd have this session would be a bit of a whakawhiti kōrero, a bit of a Q&A panel discussion, talking about the incredible mahi and the mātauranga resurgence that these two wahine are bringing and gifting to all of us. And so firstly, before we get into it, I actually just wanted each of you to share a little bit about yourselves that isn't necessarily the profile that I read off. So if there's, in addition to, something that you can share with us that maybe nobody knows about you.
I'm going to share a song.
Kia ora, kia ora.
Kia ora tātou, e mihi ana ki tēnā o koutou I te whare, o te raki a koe ki ane, ki a koe, Hinemua, tino hi kaka tēnā kau te noho tahi, wānanga tahi, I te rā nei. I'll begin with that song, the Pūrere Hua song of Hedini Melbourne, one of my absolute favourites, because we're in the season of purification and healing and renewal and letting go of the old, and in doing so we make space for new energy, new dreams, new opportunities, and we give ourselves space then to soar and fly. Yeah, and like the Pūrere Hua, she's beautiful, she's fragile, she only has a moment to share, yeah, in a really joyous way and be in her beauty, and what a teacher. So kia ora tātou, that's how I'm going to begin. Yeah.
Tēnā koe.
Te whare e tū nei au e ka ranga mai, Te marae tākoto nei ka ranga. E te iwi, e pahi nei. Tēnā rā kōtou katoa. E noho ana i te roro o tōku whare, ko te reo mihi tērā. Whakarongorua rā kutaringa ki te tae o pārengarenga, e āki ana te taha o tō mātou waka ko kura haupō. Ka tītiro whakatiraki atu ki muri motu, i hoki maharau ki tū matahina me tana mahi o rai tewi, e ai ki aia te kuaka marangaranga, te kotahi manu i tau ki te tahuna, tau atu, tau atu, tau atu. Anei te tahi kuaka e mihi ana ki a koutou. He whakaro nui tērā e pāna ki ngā pūrere hua, ngā manu hoki, he tohu pai ki ngā tupuna ki a tātou hoki, e pāna ki ngā wawata, ngā whakaro hou, te here kore o ngā whakaro pia. It's an absolute privilege and a pleasure to be with you all. And I have to say, just spending time with wahine Mauri is a very healing thing for all of us, for us as wahine. Really felt that strongly last night, and I feel it again today, and it's wonderful to see you guys fire some of our amazing mare kura from Te Tai Tokero in the house. Feel really blessed to be here. Kia ora.
Kia ora. So you both do research. I can't even think of the proper kupu as to what you do, because you do so many things, but you're both in the space of Indigenous research. And Indigenous research is broad and it's deep, tino hohonu tērā. What has been a favourite part of the Indigenous research journey that has actually changed or transformed you? Because if we're going to flow on from the pūrere hua whakaro, what is something that you have been a part of in your research over the years that has really been transformational for you?
I can start if you want. So my PhD was about traumatic brain injury, because in my training, particularly at Starship, I saw a lot of our tamariki mokopuna who had been in accidents, in sporting accidents, other kinds of accidents, and there was an absolute cultural silence around he tapu te upoko and cultural things that needed to come forward to be available to our tamariki and our whānau. And so I could see that there was nobody else in my specialty area. I'm the only Maori child and adolescent psychiatrist. So I thought, well, I better do something about this. And one of the things I knew that I had to do was to go home. I had to go home and ask my own whānau, my own people up in Potahi, Marae, up in Te Kao, is this okay for me to do it? Because I knew in my puku, because my tupuna were telling me, that anything to do with the tinana, but and particularly the upoko, you know, this is a very sacred area to do research about, and the nature of that research and the nature of the questions we ask. And so one of the foundational things for me is that we can critique the word Indigenous. Some of my colleagues in different parts of the world don't like that word very much, but if we can just put that to one side for a moment, we ask different questions because we look at the world through different eyes. We look at the world wherever we are on the spectrum of how colonised we are, because to take from Tamaiti's kōrero, we're all colonised AF. And yet we're trying our best to release ourselves from those chains. Most of them are in there. So I think going home for me was profound, and really, and recognising that any research that I was going to do had to withstand the critique first and foremost of my old people. And then I also wanted it to be able to withstand the critique of what we might call conventional science. and I wanted to do research that was going to make a difference. I think one of the defining differences for me between the research that we do, and I'm interested actually in life is a form of research, right? I don't agree with this sort of rarefied idea that research only occurs in some kind of special place, is that we want it to make a difference. We don't just want to do some sort of study, observe something, ask a question about it, try to change it and see what happens. We actually want to make a difference in our whānau's lives, in our communities' lives. So there's a deep sense of purpose which comes from our puku, our manawa, hinengaro, who's living all around the place. Whereas I think for many Pākehā people, Pākehā researchers, that is not their end goal, that is not their intention. And often the arguments that I've had over the years, whether I've been in roles at the Health Research Council, at the universities, is to challenge my Pākehā colleagues who are really about status and moving up the food chain of those organisations. So maybe I'll just pause there.
That's great, kōrero. And I completely agree. I think as tangata whenua, kaupapa Mauri, mana wahine researchers, Indigenous researchers, we're coming from a place of service, and our research graphs into an intergenerational journey of cultural recovery and reclamation and decolonisation, stripping away all the crap we've been told to believe about who we are, especially as wahine, because we've been defined in a way that's really derogatory, relegated to inferiority, recast as polluting to the sacred. I don't know how that can be when we are the source of life, but anyway. But our research, I think, is motivated by some fundamental principles of tino rangatiratanga, mana motuhake, restoring balance, bringing healing, doing our little bit to facilitate healing, and empowering and transforming this kind of dynamic that we've inherited as colonised peoples. So it's a liberatory project, and it's an intergenerational agenda. And I think the other thing is that for us it's sacred. If we're working with mātauranga Māori, if we're working with tīpuna kōrero, with pūrākau, it's sacred, and so we come in a sacred way, and really it's about the negotiation of relationships and the restoration of relationships. You know, the knowledge, so we create a relationship with the knowledge itself, especially if it's fallen from the world, because I don't believe that knowledge is lost. Knowledge for us as tangata whenua, like other Indigenous people around the world, sacred knowledge, our sacred knowledge, has its own rhythm, its own pulse, its own Mauri, and it moves in and out of the world. And if the timing is right, and the alignments are right, and everything is right, then we can call those knowledges back into the world. Why would we do that? To heal ourselves and restore balance. And that's what we're doing, and liberating ourselves. So it's a sacred way. It's coming to know. I completely agree with you, Dr. Hinemoa. It's not some abstract thing, and it's not about climbing any kind of ladder or anything like that, because we are in service to the needs of the people. And so, you know, like, so in my mahi, looking at calling back into the world our rites of passage as wahine, our pre-colonial ceremonies around the whare tangata, the knowledges, the rituals, the philosophies that speak to the mana and tapu of the whare tangata. It's about, I've had to form relationship with specific atua wahine whose knowledges, those knowledges fall into the realms of specific atua wahine. So it's about coming into relationship with them, the atua wahine, asking permission, deepening the relationship, and then calling those knowledges in. Let me be a conduit for those knowledges to come in and through. Why? To facilitate a little bit of healing and transformation and empowerment for the people. Yeah. Kia ora.
Tautoko marika.
Now, I truly believe that it is wahine huadarungoa to the world, and we are having a conversation here around colonisation, and we live in a colonised country where Western culture and Western practices and Western knowledge systems are preferenced everywhere. And you both work in spaces that come into conflict with that whakaaro quite a lot. How do you deal with that? How do you break through that Western preference? Because it's seeped into everything. How do you get your whakaaro through that solid brick wall?
It's easy. We just claim the space for ourselves, and we're really unapologetic about it. This is our time. And we have the solutions. Our research, we're covering ancestral teachings, yes, but it's future focused. We know as Indigenous people, as tangata whenua, we have the solutions to the crisis that humanity faces right now. The solutions aren't going to come from settler society because it's fundamentally deficient in its disconnection from the taiao. So we take confidence in that, and we will claim the space, you know, and we have faith in our own ways of knowing. So yeah, I think that. But the other thing is that it's because of the hard work of others too. Like for me as a mana wahine researcher, recovering mātauranga related to us as wahine that's been censored and omitted from the record, it's because of the courage and the foresight and the hard work of others, of wahine like my kuia Rangimari e Pere. She booted the door open into scholarship and used her own voice to begin to define us for ourselves. Never mind somebody else saying who we are. No, that those days are over. And wahine like Leonie Pihama, Linda Tuhiwai Smith, Annie Makaere, Aroha Yates Smith, so they were the ones that established a platform for us to see, for me and my work to speak, and for my generation, and it will be same for the next generation. Like I said, this is an intergenerational journey of recovery, of recovering ourselves, and every generation will do their little bit to feed the momentum of that journey of recovery. Yeah.
Tautoko marika. I think I agree with everything you've said, and I suppose the other thing is we are specific about the problems. So I think telling the details of the story has a lot of power. I'll give you an example. So when I resigned from Auckland University, actually, because a whole group of professors wrote a really racist letter about how they were scared, essentially, by the proposal that mātauranga would be taught on an equal basis with conventional science. And this was appalling to them. And so they wrote a letter which was published in the Listener. And it really made me very, very angry. And so I resigned from Auckland University. And partly also because none of my Pākehā colleagues there were prepared to do anything about it, which I think is shameful. So I think the devil is in the detail often, and taking that energy that we often find, and sometimes when we can't quite get there, we have to go away and have a rest and come back to these fights. But when we're up for the fight, we need to be very detailed and specific with Pākehā people in power, because they don't want to share it. No. They don't want to share it. They don't want us to have the resources that we need. Yeah. You know, I often fantasize, as I did this morning, waking up after our wonderful night last night, thinking, if we were in charge of everything, gee, it would be very different. Indigenous research would look very different. We're expected to do absolute miracles with crumbs from the table. So I'll give you a very specific example from Brain Research New Zealand. When I started there in 2015, I could see that the three people who were obvious for promotion were three Mauri women. So I said, we're going to promote these women, and as you may know, in universities there's a death by 1,000 paper cuts. You have to fill in a lot of forms when you want people to get promoted. So I said, all right, let's get cracking. So we got all the paperwork done, and I went around and did the hui before the hui, right? This is beautiful tikanga. And I went around, I checked in with all these esteemed pale male stale colleagues and soothed the savage ego as much as I could and made sure that there were no surprises. But of course, people do like to remind you in final meetings that they are in charge and you are this little Maori girl over here. So what one of my colleagues said to me was, well, this is not the CV of a principal investigator. And I thought, fuck. And I said, you're quite right. As we've already discussed, this woman has been working in the community tirelessly for the last 30 years. And so she has not published papers as other principal investigators have. She's published a lot of papers, don't get me wrong, but not as many, and not as many chapters, right? So he didn't like that, but he went, And then he said, very patronisingly, do you think she's ready for this level of leadership? You know, I mean, it's hard not to, it's almost like people are trying to invite us to really match the stereotypes that they have of us, right? We have all sorts of cool names for that in psychiatry, which I won't bore you with right now. But that's the good thing about being a psychiatrist, because I can sort of analyse some of the stuff as it's happening. And I thought, right, okay. So I said, well, this woman has been in leadership roles, whether she liked it or not, for more than 30 years. Maybe we should get our non-Maori principal investigators to write on their CVs and to require them to demonstrate their Maori cultural competency in working with our Maori communities, given that's in the contract that we have from the Tertiary Education Commission. So that's I just give you that example as going for the detail when that's what's required to get the thing over the line, and knowing what the detail is. So this is what I say to all my Māori medical students and registrars and colleagues, is we actually have to know much more than our Pākehā colleagues. We have to know the legislation, we have to know the policy, we have to have relationships, but we have to stand our ground calmly as much as we can, sometimes not quite so calmly. So that's how I try to roll with it. And then I go home and, you know, scream off the balcony. It's very frustrating. And you know, we're expected to do all of this. And also train the Pākehā people. Train the Pākehā people constantly to know about our world. And Pākehā people in the audience, I'm saying this constructively, I'm talking about the systems level of things. Of course, we have many allies, and the allies will be here. Thank you. And you will also see it. You will see your Pākehā colleagues milking it and taking our time and energy away from the things that we actually need to focus on.
I want to pick up on something you just said, which was teach them about our world. And earlier I was listening to Stacey Morrison up here talking about the resurgence and the reclamation that's happening in Te Ao Māori, and that has been happening over the last sort of 10 years quite intensely. You know, we've got Matariki public holiday coming up next week, and it's all part of that reclamation. And while your kōrero was about teaching others about our world, there's so many of us who need to learn about our world and who would love to sit inside your brain for a year and just be and absorb. And part of sharing your mātauranga has been publishing these books. And these books have been transformational for many people. Being able to read whakatauki and the interpretations of those whakatauki in a real world from a lived experience, to be able to read and learn about ikura from both an more academic way of reading, and then a puka that is so accessible to our tamariki, to ourselves, and thinking about rethinking about how we transition our young women into the next phase of their lives and how we support their transition, and just completely reframing the way that we think about all of these things. And so when we talk about the reclamation of our ao and the teaching of the mātauranga, really the written word has been quite impactful, and both of your books have been extremely impactful in supporting those who are on a reclamation journey. Can you tell us and share with us a bit about why, what drove you to create these pukapuka and what impact you envisioned them to have?
I just wanted to get the word out there because I was so, the beauty, the elegance and beauty of our tipuna kōrero, of the world of our tipuna, the way they saw the whare tangata, the role of tāne and all of that, because tāne are not excluded from the kōrero, they have a stake in the kōrero. Just the beauty of it, really, what a journey. So humbling to come into knowing and just to be able to facilitate bringing those kōrero in and then release, and then tuku te ao ki a tātou to heal us. Yeah, I just wanted to get it out. It was a real celebratory thing. There's a lot of mamai with dealing with the whare tangata, because she houses trauma. She houses intergenerational trauma. She's the house of whakapapa. She's the kaitiaki of whakapapa. She's the only way in and out of this world, and so she's the inner temple. She's the temple, and in the temple there's wisdom, there's intergenerational wisdom, there's mamai, there's trauma, there's memory. There's a whole lot of things, and so that was one of the things with this kaupapa is bringing it to the people. That was one of the things, is sitting with our people, recovering these teachings and working through the mamai that the whare tangata will, once you start going into teachings around the whare tangata, you're gonna have to you'll encounter the mamai, and it goes back to the raupatu, because he wahine he whenua. It goes back to the raupatu. It goes back to the use of sexual violence as a colonial weapon. If you want to take a people out, if you want to oppress and control a people, you got to take out the wahine. It's the same all over the world. You've got to bring the woman to their knees, and they did, And so this recovery thing, the last 10 years. Well, yeah, now we got matariki, but this has been an intergenerational journey. You know what I mean? Like, every generation has sacrificed, and it wasn't that long ago that the settler government were erecting monuments to pass our inevitable extinction, and we come back from that. We've come back from that. We retreated, and we were in our hokainga, recovering, and we're still in a state of recovery. And I don't care if you were born in the bush and a native speaker of Te Reo Māori, there's not one single person in this country that hasn't been affected by colonisation. We're all on that journey, and it's a spectrum. Yeah, so ka aroha tātou. But I don't know if I answered your question. But
I do have a sub-question to my question, which is, have you, and someone actually asked me this at my workshop, and it was a really great question, so I'm going to tahai that. When we think of the impact, have you experienced other people sharing the impact your pukapuka have had with them? Like, have they said, this is how this has impacted me and my whānau and changed things?
Yeah, and that's beautiful all the time, everywhere, because they, like I said at the beginning, our tipuna mātauranga has its own Mauri, and in terms of Te Awatua, she's got wings and she's got her own hiding and now, but But what's been buzzy is going other places around the world, being stopped at the airport, was someone who's got a watua in her bag and says, hey, can you sign? Or just working with other Indigenous peoples. And like probably one of the most beautiful things that I've been involved with is being in Turtle Island in Canada, working with the Mohawks. I was on the Six Nations Grand River Reservation, working with them. Santi Smith was the choreographer and director, working with them to use ritual theatre as a medium to reactivate ikura ceremonies in their community that have been asleep for 500 years, man. Like their history of colonisation is so long that they've lost the names of their own atua wahine. Ka aroha. And the ceremonies have fallen from the consciousness of the people. So I was over there working with a full Indigenous cast, dancers from all over the world, Indigenous women. The musicians were just phenomenal, the lighting, the whole thing. And what was cool was they actually had this on the stage, the prop, they had this prop. It was this huge cervix, and it was a stargate, because it is a stargate. It is a stargate. And a portal between worlds, the gate between worlds, only way in and out of this world. And they were using it, and they were crafting, they were creating scenes. Every scene was a ceremony. Every ceremony had a intention to reactivate and wake up specific knowledges in the minds of the people and the community. It was so beautiful. So yeah, that's been buzzy, is the mahi, the te awatua, ikura kaupapa, the way, just witnessing the way it has travelled and what it's doing for us here, but how it's stimulated other Indigenous people in their journeys of recovery, because it's the same for them. They're dealing with the same issues, and especially the wahine, same issues, relegated to inferiority, reframed as polluting to the sacred, all the same things. So that's been cool too, to see that, oh look, we're not in this on our own. Yeah, we're not in this on our own. We're all in this together. Yeah. I don't know if I answered your question.
So everyone here's and got dreamy eyes, so it's fine. They're all just like, oh, keep talking. Did you need me to ask you the part again?
So trying to answer the question about the first question, which is about why did I write that book? I think, there are certain times in our lives when a whole lot of seemingly unconnected things synthesize and come together. And that's kind of what happened for me. And there was this huge sense of responsibility. Yeah. I had seen in various places in my life, on my reo journey to Wharehuia Milroy, being in the whare with him, teaching us whakatauki, whakatauaki, and just basking in that energy. Really feeling that energy, that ancient energy flowing through us, the tauira, and onto the next generations, and just feeling part of that intergenerational whakapapa. And in my mahi, my let's say clinical mahi, my mahi as a doctor, as a Mauri doctor, really feeling the friction of the rub of our worlds, and this disconnection from te taiao, and how that impacts on mental illness and distress, and seeing that really crystallise on a daily basis, and also seeing how healing reconnection with te taiao is. So one of the things that actually came out of my PhD and my postdoc around traumatic brain injury was a recognition that part of people's rehabilitation, although I don't actually use that word in my rangahau, but but essentially in part of people's healing journey, and the whānau is the whole unit of healing, never an individual person. The whole whānau needs to be offered opportunity to reconnect with the places in te tai ao that are important for them from a whakapapa perspective. So all of those things really sort of combined, and I was compelled. It's like something else takes over and you just can't not do it. And I started writing, and I was thinking and drawing on the things that had worked in various parts of my life with people who were in a lot of pain and suffering, and seeing how incredibly healing those things were, how incredibly healing whakatauki and whakatauki are. And that's the genius of our tūpuna, that they've infused these magical nuggets of wisdom, these tiny pockets of absolute magical power with so many layers, so that, you know, I was also very cautious, believe me. I was like, oh, you know, walking into this whole arena of mātauranga and recognising my ignorance and my area. You know, I have very small areas where I've been privileged to learn a few things. But actually, all I wanted to demonstrate and make available to a wider audience was, these are the ways that I've interpreted these things in my own life, and maybe that can help other people. And that felt comfortable, and, you know, checked in with my whānau. Peniaha Mauri, actually, one of our beloved kaumātua, who was, by his own definition, a bit of a ghostbuster. So, you know, from the far north, we are all a bit spooky. And Peniaha blessed the book, and that felt really good too. And we've done some other work together, probably not, we don't have time to go into that now, never mind. But so that's kind of why. And then the impact, I've been absolutely blown away by the impact. I had no idea. I thought, well, first and foremost, people on their journey, or maybe people who are thinking but they're a bit whakamā, or they think, because I see in my work, I see a lot of our people, my relations in particular, who are like, oh, miss, I'm a bit of a plastic Mauri, I don't know where I'm from. I'm like, oh, I think I know your uncle. Are you from Kaikohe? Oh, yeah. How do you know that? You know, and then and offering karakia and offering all those things that we can offer each other, and then seeing the emotional response, and then seeing the openness to wanting to learn, but they've never actually found an honouring opening for them. And so thinking about the book as that, just another way to open that door a little bit. So I get messages from the just random as our own people all the time. And some of these people are in a lot of trouble and really struggling. And I feel incredibly humble when they reach out through, you know, so that's a good thing about social media. And then some like wild stuff, you know, somebody from Delhi, like, oh, I just bought your book in a bookshop in Delhi and I love it. I'm like, okay, cool. If it's relatable, or somebody in, you know, Sweden, and look, I do believe the future is Indigenous. You know, our planet needs Indigenous people, needs us, because we are the planet. We are. You know, I almost think of us like amoeba. You know, we have these human forms, but really we are like manifestations that come out of the ground. You know, up where we're from, some of the old people talk about us as our ancestors were worms, right? Doesn't sound too sexy, does it? But hey, that's our tupuna. And because of the intimate relationship with Papa, and I often think of us like that. And for other cultures, it's not the same. So I think we have a unique responsibility. And I think Papa's calling to us all the time, and you touched on this beautifully too last night, Ewa. Like our planet is trying to give us messages all the fucking time. and we're a little bit, you know, taringa painter. We've got to unblock those ears and the Mauri ears in the heart to really hear what we need to do. So that's my response.
Yeah, tautoko all the way. And I think it's about, all we have to do is make the time, is take the time to listen. That's all it is. It's just taking the time. Yeah. So on the way, because we get caught up in stuff, don't we? Things get really hectic. We get swept away with life and with our responsibilities and obligations and all the rest of it. And it's actually creating a ritual around routinely taking time to retreat and rest and listen to what the mother has to say to us. To what the taiao has to say to us. Because that's right, that's the source of all healing, eh? It's just reconnecting with our elders, na atua, and reconnecting with ourselves.
Just speaking of time, we're getting close to. And I do want to open it up soon, very soon. I want to open up to allow you beautiful people to ask a couple pakupātai. But just before I do, I actually thought it would be a really beautiful way to share, as if maybe we could get I don't want to say favourite, but a whakatauki from your puka that you can share with us, and maybe a piece from one of your puka that you can share with us just while people are getting their pātai ready.
Okay. I'm happy to kick off. So I would like to share a whakatauaki from Whaia Moi Milne. So I was very lucky to have Moi as she's been like a second mother to me, bigger sister. She's probably not old enough to be another mother. Well, that's bad, isn't it? Sorry, Whaia. So we've had a lot to do with each other over the last 20 years. And when we were developing we're trying to develop a kaupapa Māori service in Counties Manukau, DHB, whole other kaupapa, she coined this whakatauaki, which goes like this: Ka tū tonu koe I roto I te aroha. Stand in the love. And it's often quite challenging, isn't it, e te whānau, to stand in the love, because you want to stand in the riri. Or the hoha, or the he manawa. Yeah. But you know, I find that very helpful as a kind of reframe to go, hang on a minute, where's that aroha? Because the aroha is actually, for me, where the resources get unlocked in here, and here, and here, and in the tinana katoa. And so when I do feel a bit, should we say, kohanga weka, as I was saying last night, but all over the place, I just remind myself, stand in the love. Ka tū tonu koe roto te aroha. It really helps. So maybe it might work for you too. Kia ora.
Kia ora. I'm just looking for my kuia. This is a kōrero from my kuia Rangimari e Pere about te awatua, about the blood. She says, I heke mai te awa o te tangata mai a papatu ānuku. He tika kia hoki atu te awa atua ki aia. He tika kia hoki atu te whenua ki aia. I hou mai tātou mai aia. Whenua ki te whenua awa tapu ki a papatu ānuku. The river of humanity descends from papatu ānuku, and so the divine river returns back to her. So too the placenta returns to her. It was gifted to us from her. Placenta back to the land, sacred river back to papatu ānuku. I love that. You know, and because it's those whare tangata ceremonies that inform the name we have for ourselves as tangata whenua. Yeah, that's who we are. Look for the whakapapa to Jesus, couldn't find it. You know? We are from the womb of the mother papatu ānuku. Yeah, so kia ora.
Kia ora. Okay, he pātai. Kia ora, Trin.
Tēnā koutou, nei huri, no ngā tukimata o kahununa mihi atu ana ki a koutou. Kia ora. Beautiful kōrero, thank you for taking the time to share of your presence and of your space and of your whakaaro and experience to offer to us, to consume and to take into our own worlds and gift to our people in the different spaces we're in. I wanted to ask a pātai, I had so many floating around, I was like, okay, what's the one to go with? And I think what you were talking about, Dr. Ngāhia, when you were talking about connecting back to our elders and connecting back to our old people, I'm like, am I going to get a bit of flack for this? I'm like, nah, I'm going to do it anyway. What happens, or I'm interested in how that whakaaro intersects when you are takatāpui or exist in like a gender diverse space, but you go to a pōhiri, tāne, wahine, and it's like, where do you stand? And then you go to your elders and they don't even know what takatāpui, non-binary, genderqueer, any of that is. What are you supposed to do when going back to your people means going to a way of thinking that means you're inherently erased? And in my mind, that's colonisation done right? I think it's I think
this
it's
is a
important.
really important kaupapa.
And I'm
It's
like,
really
I want to
important.
connect, but I'm like, I can't go to a marae without being gendered, and I'm like,
Yes. I remember my kuia. Somebody said to her, "Ekui, what's the name, for takatāpui? What's the name for? What's a traditional name?" She said, "Whānau." Whānau. Since when did we start to exclude one another and think that we've got the right to determine and define who's legitimately and authentically Maori and who's not? No.
I agree. And I've had this conversation with a number of people over the last couple of years and trying to find a solution and navigate a path. And I think that the practicalities are really important, and it is about finding those ones within the whānui who can support those who are trying to navigate that path, and then to have some wānanga at home and actually rediscover who are the tupuna who can be linked. Who never sat as a wahine or tāne, who actually sat in another way. And some of the stories around takatāpui, that some of them more easily accessible, but then there's other deeper stories which have been uncovered in other whānau that I've had some connection with. So I think the first thing is you're asking a very important question. And I'm sure there's other people in the room who probably wanted to ask the same question. So you're not alone. There are many seeking these answers. There are actually many whānau where the first response of kaumātua is, we don't know, you're either one or the other. But actually under that first layer of their own whakaaro, they actually know that there's other stuff going on too. But it's harder for our kaumātua to come forward with that to start with. So it's also about creating a space for them to relax and actually share some of the things that might be a bit more awkward for them. That's a really, really important kaupapa. Thank you.
Good for us to wānanga that,
Wānanga,
together.
everything. Yep.
Everybody's got a place.
Yep. Yeah.
And it's not like we're talking about anything new. Like, I think about the ritual roles and responsibilities of takatāpui and Aotearoa, and then what I've seen with other Indigenous peoples around the world, like the Mahu in Hawaii. Beautiful, their mana.
Yeah.
You know, and it's the same thing of just recovering ourselves, you know, and standing in the mana of that. You have a role. We all do, you know.
Also, some of the issues that have come up in situations I've been involved with have been around the delicate issue around Christianity.
Yes, indeed.
And how do we hold the mana of those of our whānau who have strong Christian beliefs, and at the same time find a way for for other beliefs to be welcomed and embraced and included in the narratives of our whānau and of our whakapapa. So it's not an easy one, that's for sure, otherwise we would have sorted it out. But it is also recognising that there are layers of pain and different kinds of colonisation within different parts of that story.
I've been really reflecting a lot on the nature of colonisation in Aotearoa, the nature of it in Aotearoa, Christianity, Victorian patriarchal ideologies that absolutely permeate, continue to permeate this society and our own culture now. And the witch hunts, the witch hunts 400 years in Britain and Europe, but those really kind of misogynist ideologies have been instrumental in terms of legislation, in terms of what colonial historians wrote about who we are as a people. If you trace the language, it goes back to the witch hunts and their doctrine. Yeah, and I've just been thinking a lot about it and how, gosh, we still, because we're born into this society and a lot of the way that we think, we sort of take for granted. It's not until we're rolling, like some of my friends from Latin America, and they dance and they're very celebratory about their bodies, and colonisation has colonised our bodies, our minds, our emotions, everything, and our identities, yeah. And we need to wānanga. But inclusivity is everything, man. We're in this together.
Pātai? Yeah, we've got time for one more. Yeah, okay. I suppose you can have it. Do we have any other? Not saying you can't have it. I'm just checking. Do we have any other pātai? Kyle, so just the one. Kia ora, kei a koe. You're lucky.
Kia ora. Probably don't need it because I'm loud enough. But tēnei te mihi ki a kōrua mō tō mātauranga, mō tō kupu, hapaitia te mana o wāhine, ngā tangata katoa, ngā tangata whenua. Yeah. So kia ora kōrua, Miriana. My pātai is for probably largely ngāhuia, but you might have some whakaaro. How do we, those of us with a whare tangata, release that fear about going back to the ways of old in terms of contraception? I know this is something that's very scary for myself, and not wanting to stop using, the pill or those sorts of like contraceptives, and knowing that mātauranga that you've brought forward exists, but that fear of like, oh, I don't want to get pregnant, scared about getting pregnant. How do you overcome, make that leap to say, actually, yeah, this worked for my tipuna, and actually I can trust it and do it. Yeah, kia ora.
Kia ora. I just think that we have to recover a loving relationship as wahine with our own bodies and our tāne too. But kurawaka, we're talking the reproductive body of wahine as a stolen land. It's a stolen landscape. It's ritual land, it's cosmological land, it's land that houses the Mauri of the hapori, of the whānau, hapu, iwi. It's sacred land, but it's land that we are out of touch with because of the influence of Christianity and patriarchy. The mission stations targeted wahine, they targeted our tipuna wahine. And because they knew if you want to control a people, you've got to institute, you've got to normalise the idea of hierarchy and being dominated by others. And you've got to target the woman, because the woman will go back out into the community and convert from the inside. But that's where we started to because I've part of my research, I've looked at the letters that the missionary wives wrote one another, because it was Pākehā women that were the disciplinarians in those spaces, and they actually they ran the mission stations. That's why for us as, you know, as a mana wahine researcher, it's not the same as white feminism at all, you know, and we're not going to have any kind of solidarity with Pākehā women until they recognise their stake in the colonial and the violent colonial process. But that's where we started, in the mission stations, to censor our own tongues about the joyousness with which we expressed our own sexuality, our own sensuality, in all its myriad of beautiful forms. We were so celebratory about our own bodies. Why? Because it's about the vivacity of life. That's what sexuality is, the tawhito, the tara. So many different words, and the one that I really love is tapito. It's the ancient centre. It's ancient. You know, and it connects us directly with the vivacity and pulse of life through orgasm. Hey, through orgasm we encounter the divine and we enter Hawaii. So again, I don't know if I answered your question. What was the question?
Contraception.
Oh, it was about contraception.
The answer is get hapu. Don't worry about it. Don't worry.
I just think we've got to recover an intimate a relationship and of our own bodies. Yeah. So sorry, I don't know about contraception. But
That was the first time I'd heard the kupu tawhito, and as soon as you said it, all I thought about was cobwebs, and I was like, oh. Oh. Anyway. Tino mihi mahana kia korua. Mō tō mātauranga me o tō korua toha kia mātau, te tākoha o tō korua mātauranga kia mātau. I just want to promote puka puka. So just over there, you can buy them. Go and buy aroha. It's on the bestsellers list every week, and it makes me really hoha because every time I go on there, I'm like, okay, there's no go on there, I'm like, oh, it's aroha again. But then it also makes me extremely and incredibly proud that a wahine Mauri puka puka is on the bestsellers list every single week. So make sure you keep it on there. Go and buy this book. There are two puka puka from Ngāhuia. Make sure you go and buy these two. Showing you so you know what you're looking for when you go to the pantry.
you know they're the most stolen, Rafa? Apparently at McLeod's booksellers, they don't put them out on the shelf, they put them behind the counter because they're the most stolen puka puka. I'm like, oh, just leave them.
And because I self-published my book, I have to shamelessly promote mine too. So, Nuku, Stories of 100 Kakas Indigenous Wahine, of which Ngāhuia is one of them, and I'm sure Dr. Hinema will be in the next 100. So go and get that. So just tēnā korua anō. Thank you all for listening today and being part of this beautiful wānanga. Have a safe ride home. Ka kite.